Kahala Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai Ba'Shem Ruach, which are the true Hebrew names of the Most High Father, Yahweh, which is Hebrew for He is, and His only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai, which is Hebrew for He is salvation. Double honors to my teachers, the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect, with the house of David reborn again in this generation. And Shalom to the 130 Asherallah, who today are known as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, who before losing our true heritage, we were known as, and still are, the true Hebrew Israelites of the Holy Bible. In today's lesson, we're going to get into the tribe of Issachar, or as they're known today, the so-called Mexicans, which is the tribe that I'm from. Now, in the video we just watched, that was a depiction of what the first encounter of the Europeans when they came to the Americas and discovered the Issacharites here in the Americas, or as they knew it, as Areth. Now, the so-called Mexicans, when you get into their heritage, which is what we're going to get into today, you're going to find out that they are one of the 12 tribes of Israel, namely of the tribe of Issachar. The name Issachar is in Hebrew pronounced Yeshashakar, and that basically means he is hired, and that goes back to a nomen omen that comes from the mother which we come from, right? You had our forefather Jacob. He had 4 wives, and his first wife, Leah, gave him a son, his 9th born son, that being Issachar. And the story goes that Leah, she was kind of like in a competition with her sister Rachel, and to basically hire her husband Jacob, she basically paid Rachel in mandrake fruits, right? And seeing Jacob coming in from the fields, Leah had told Jacob that she basically had hired him for the night, and that, you know, he was to go with her. And when she conceived Issachar, that's where they got that name from, right? He is hired. And here's the actual story of what I just described. This is Genesis 30:18. And Leah said, God hath given me my hire, because I have given my maiden to my husband. And she called his name Issachar. Now, because Issachar was one of the 12 sons of Jacob, he was given a blessing and a future prophecy by his father. And that prophecy was given at the end of Jacob's life, when he knew that he was about to move on to glory. He basically prophesied of what would befall his sons, basically their descendants in the end days. But let's read this. This is Genesis 49:1. And Jacob called unto his sons and said, Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. So you see, this here is what we use today to identify which tribe or which people. Okay, and this is why the Edomites, the so-called Caucasians that try to claim that the Israelites are the European countries and whatnot, they don't match these prophecies. Okay, they don't match any of the spiritual signs that Jacob declared upon his 12 sons. This is why we know, along with the curses that came upon the Israelites, who the Israelites are today, and of those people, who the tribes of those people are. This is the blessing that, or the prophecy that Jacob gave unto Issachar. This is Genesis 49:14. Issachar is a strong ass crouching down between 2 burdens, and he saw that rest was good, and the land that it was pleasant, and bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant unto tribute. Now, this here breaks down into multiple things, right? So when it tells you here that Issachar is a strong ass, this here is ultimately talking about how the so-called Mexicans, we're hard workers, okay? And it's become such a popular term that there's jokes and made about it, and it's part of a stereotype. And when you get into the statistics, this came out in the LA Weekly of Phoenix, right? It tells you, it says Mexicans work more than you and everyone else in the world, report shows. And this is from 2011, right? It shows a bunch of different nations, right? The blue represents paid work, and the gray represents unpaid work. Basically, like what they do on their houses and just other stuff that you do around, chores, that type of stuff, right? Well, look all over here, Mexicans, right? We even beat out the so-called Japanese people. And remember, Japanese have that stereotype that they work so hard that they basically have heart attacks at work, right? They have a corporate man mind that prevails over there. But look, us Latinos, we work more than them combined, right? We're the hardest workers in the world. Again, it's fulfilling that prophecy that we are strong ass, right? Strong donkeys, right? Because again, donkeys are synonymous with hard labor. Okay, they can do a lot of work compared to horses. Now it says here, crouching down between two burdens. This is twofold, right? Not only is it talking about the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean, or basically the Gulf of Mexico, right? Basically borders both of our lands there in Mexico, but also between the Northern America, right? The land of the Edomites, and the Southern America, right? The land of the majority of the tribes, right? The 12 tribes, that is, right? So we're stuck between these two burdens. Next, it says that he saw rest was good, right? And the land was pleasant, right? This ultimately goes into how basically we enjoy our relaxation, right? We enjoy relaxing, and people even talk about the siestas, right? How there's even mimes about the so-called Mexicans taking like afternoon naps. Now that's one interpretation of this, but also it just refers to when you get into our the so-called Mexicans, we love to just relax with the family, have barbecues, carne asadas, basically just grilling and relaxing with the family. That's a big thing amongst the so-called Mexicans. And another thing too, where it says the land, it was pleasant. Mexico, it's renowned for its beaches and also its jungle, pyramids, and basically a lot of vacation spots are there in Mexico, right? It's a very fruitful land. There's tons of fruit and food that is just able to be grown in that climate just because of how where it is, right? And then down here it just says and he bowed his shoulder to bear and became a servant unto tribute. And this basically speaks to kind of like being a strong ass, right? A so-called Mexican, we take on so many jobs for money. When you look at basically the landscaping, the construction industry, basically manual labor, you have that field basically filled up by a lot of so-called Mexicans, right? Basically Issacharites, and that's because this is our blessing, right? That we would be hard workers, right? We would seek after that work and bear shoulder and become servants all for money. Especially people in my family, everybody has a side hustle and everybody's making money and everybody has a side project going on. If it's not a project for themselves, it's a project because they're getting paid, right? That they picked up a couple of jobs here and there to do something, be it build a brick wall, landscape, set up a new roof, set up a computer, and all these type of stuff, right? It's very common amongst the so-called Mexicans for that to go on. Now, another thing about the Issacharites, the so-called Mexicans, is this. This is 1 Chronicles 12:32. And the children of Issachar, which were men that had understanding of the times, to know that what Israel ought to do. The heads of them were 200, and all their brethren were at their commandment. Now, this here explains how us Issacharites, the so-called Mexicans, that we're avid readers of the stars. Okay, we were given the knowledge to be able to read the stars. This is why there is like the Mayan calendar, right, which really is an Aztec calendar when you look at it, right? It was created by the Aztecs. The Mayan and the Aztecs, for the most part, we were one nation, and then we ultimately split into two. But when you look at the characteristics of the Aztecs, we were the ones that had the star charts. We were the ones that had the reflecting poles to read the stars and study them, right? We were the ones that kept the astrological records. And even till this day, astronomy is big amongst the so-called Mexicans, right? Even me, as a hobby, I love getting into astronomy, looking at the stars and gauging their positions, right? In fact, if you've looked up into the sky the last couple of weeks, you've noticed Venus next to the moon, right? This is the current time of its path of leading the moon. But again, it's the point being is that this here is just another spiritual marker upon the Issacharites, right? Showing what they would be. Now, this here is also would come in handy because when we Northern Kingdom Israelites, which are the Latinos and Native Americans, came over here to the Americas, it was us who basically read the stars and helped us navigate over here to the Americas. When the scriptures say that the Lord showed them signs in heaven, it was the Issacharites that would have interpreted those signs. Now, let's read this, because along with the prophecies and the blessings which our forefather Jacob gave, one of our past kings, Moses, before he himself moved on to glory, he also gave a blessing onto the 12 tribes, right? And this here is what he gave onto the tribe of Issachar. This is Deuteronomy 33 and 18. And of Zebulun, he said, Rejoice, Zebulun, in thy going out, and Issachar in thy tents. And this here was given to both of us because Issachar and Zebulun, we're always around each other. Even today, you got the Mexicans and the Salvadorians, we're dwelling right next to each other. And not only that, but we also dwelt with each other back in the time when we were in our land, right? You had Issachar here and Zebulun, right? And I have a lot of family members who've married Salvadorians. I myself used to date a lot of Salvadorians. But let's go ahead and move on. So when it goes here, it tells us specifically what we shall rejoice in. Issachar is going to rejoice in his tents, meaning that the so-called Mexicans are going to basically have pride in their homes, right? Basically, build them up. And when you get into the so-called Mexican and their lifestyles, you'll notice that the Mexicans are always building up their houses. Okay, this is like a pastime, right? Just like how you have the other tribes have their own little spiritual markers. The tribe of Issachar, besides being a hard worker, they tend to always have their houses under construction or have a big elaborate setup, if they're given that blessing, that is, right? So again, that's just another spiritual marker upon our people. Now, besides that, let's go ahead and look into some of the history, because one thing about the tribe of Issachar is that we had a big hand in the governance of the Northern Kingdom. Now, the sad thing about that is that all the kings that came out of Issachar in the Northern Kingdom, for that matter, none of them were good. Now, when you look at this list here, this is a list of all the kings of the nation of Israel. It starts at Saul, and it goes from David to Solomon, and it goes through the separation of the kingdom of Israel to the southern and northern kingdom. Southern kingdom being here on the left, the northern kingdom being here on the right. And I highlighted the good or righteous kings in blue, and all the other kings basically were just wicked. Okay, now you're going to notice that all the kings on the north of the northern kingdom here on the right, they were all wicked. right? We didn't produce one good king. The only good kings came from the southern kingdom, or the so-called Negro tribes, okay? And this ultimately was just because, this is the Lord's will. Now, as it shows you here, King Hoshea of the northern kingdom was the last king, and after that, we have been taken into captivity in Assyria. But that being said, let's go ahead and go over some of these kings of the northern tribe, which were of the tribe of Issachar. And you're going to be, might be surprised, like I was, that so many of the northern kingdom kings were Issacharites, even though it was Ephraim that led the northern kingdom originally. Okay, this is King Baasha. It says his name meant Baal hears. He was an idol worshiper and was the third king of the northern Israelite kingdom of Israel. He was the son of Ahijah of the tribe of Issachar. His story is told in 1 Kings 15-16, and was a wicked king which caused Israel to sin against Yahweh. He is noted for destroying all the house of Jeroboam, and Jeroboam, the first king of Israel. All right, and then after that, you had Elah. It says the 10th king of Israel and the 4th king of the northern Israel. Okay, I basically put the 10th king because also this is accounting for the southern kingdom. All right, because I have them like listed out as far as who came after the other. But for the most part, we'll focus on the latter ranking. Right, the 4th king of the nation of Israel. Right, also referred to as Samaria. He was the son of the successor of Baasha. Chapter 16 and 1 Kings relates how Elah and all his family members were murdered by his chariot commander Zimri, who became his successor, thus fulfilling the prophecy of Jehu, the son of Hananiah, who foretold the destruction of his dynasty. And then this is Zimri, the murderer, right? King of northern Israel, which was the 5th king of North Israel, was a king of Israel for 7 days. The Bible introduces him as an Ebed, Hebrew for servant. He killed Elah while Elah was drunk and emerges as a leader without followers, a usurper, lacking administrative ability. Finding his position unattainable, he set fire to the palace and perished. His name became a byword for a traitor who murdered his master. Right, so check that out, Zimri. So, and then next is here Omri. He was the 6th king of northern Israelites, and he says he was a successful military campaigner. He built the new capital of Samaria after the death of Elah. Omri surrounded Zimra in the royal palace, leading to Zimra's death. It then took Omri 4 years to subdue Tibni, who controlled half of Samaria, and at last proclaimed himself undisputed king of Israel, and began a new dynasty which ruled Israel for the next 40 years and briefly over Judah. Okay, and then next you have Ahab. Now this guy was one of the wicked ass kings. This is the wicked ass king that married Jezebel. Right? Let's read about it. It says the 7th king of the northern kingdom, the son of Omri, husband of the infamous Jezebel, was a dominant influence on him, and whom strove to spread idol worship of Baal in Israel. He is known for the execution of Naboth and usurping of his ancestral vineyard, which is read in 1 Kings 21 and 1 through 16. That's a good story, right, to get into. In fact, all of the Kings, 1st and 2nd Kings is an awesome read, Akim. If you have time, you should really get into it, right? Because it helps show you just how dysfunctional the kingdom was under the kings, right? And especially for those who went against the Lord. It says, he also sent a lying spirit, or he was also sent a lying spirit by God to cause him to fall in battle, which is prophesied by Micaiah. During the battle, Ahab disguised himself, but was mortally wounded by an arrow, and his blood was licked up by dogs. So there you go, right? So just like Jezebel was eaten by dogs, you also had Ahab, right? He also had a similar fate, right? And the thing about him, remember, he's constantly used as an example of how the Lord will send lying spirits to trick you, man. So next, let's go and read this. This is Ahaziah. It says, the 8th king of the northern kingdom, the son of Ahab, which followed his father's ways, the Moabites revolted against his authority, which is in 2 Kings 3 and 5. This event is recorded in the Mesha Stele stone, right? Or basically the Moabite stone. So that's another thing too. So you could kind of see how this history relates to which tribe, right? So that Moabite stone is actually used as an historic record, or an archaeological record of the name of Yahweh, right? As it was recorded by the Moabites that rebelled. It says, being bedridden due to a fall from his palace roof, he sent messengers to consult Baal-zebub, god of prophecy, as to his recovery. They ran into the prophet Elijah, who sent them back to tell the king that for his wickedness, idolatry, he would never rise from his bed. Dying childless, the crown went to his brother. And then you got this king here. This is Joram, right? And it says he was the 9th king of Samaria. He also called Jehoram. He shared the same name as a king of Judah. He ruled for 12 years and formed an alliance with his nephew Ahaziah, king of Judah, to combat Aram. And the battle failed, and he was wounded. During his recovery, he faced revolt from his successor Jehu, and the revolt ended up being the end of Joram and his nephew Ahaziah. Joram was shot by Jehu's arrow. Jehu had his body thrown into the field of Naboth as punishment for his parents' sin in illegally stealing Naboth's land. So there's that story, right? And then here, this is a wicked ass bitch of our nation, right? She ultimately married the king of the southern kingdom, and he kept her in the land of the northern kingdom, kind of like as a king regent. Let's go and read it. It says, this is Athaliah. She was queen regent for 6 years, wife of King Jehoram, and a daughter of the Samaria house of Omri. She was married to Jehoram of Judah to seal a treaty between the kingdoms of Israel. After the death of Jehoram, their son Ahasuerus, along with her extended family in Samaria by Jehu, she seized the throne of Judah and ordered the execution of all claimants to the throne except for her grandson Jehoash. After 6 years, she proclaimed him king of Judah. She rushed to stop the rebellion, but was captured and executed. So this was an evil-ass Latina, man, right? An evil-ass Issacharite woman, right? And the story goes that, you know, as soon as a grandson was made king, they came in and basically took this bitch out, right, and killed her, right? So it's another warning sign to the Israelite women who think that they could come up and take authority over the men, right? It's not something willed by the Lord, right? It's not to be done. And then that's pretty much it. And because of all the wickedness of the northern kingdom, you know, namely of the tribe of Issachar, right? we ultimately got a punishment, right? And this punishment is kind of foretold here, right? This is Hosea 8 and 13. Well, actually, we're going to start at 10. Yea, though they have hired amongst the nations, now will I gather them, and they shall sorrow a little for the burden of the kings of princes. Because of Ephraim hath made many altars to sin. Ephraim is talking about the whole kingdom of the northern kingdom. Altars shall be unto him to sin. I have written to him the great things of my law, but they were counted as a strange thing. They sacrifice flesh for the sacrifices of mine offerings, and eat it. But Yahweh B'Shem Ashai accepteth them not. Now will he remember their iniquity and visit their sins. They shall return to Egypt. And Egypt we went to, right? Basically the spiritual Egypt, that being the Americas. Now, when you read about the curses that would come upon us if we fail to perform our duty and keep our contract with the Lord, which is written here in Deuteronomy 28 and 68, it says, And Yahweh B'Shem Ashai shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Basically means redeem you. Okay? And that's ultimately what had happened at this time. By the time when the last king, Hoshea of the northern kingdom, reigned, the Lord said, that's enough of you, and basically brought the Assyrians against us. Had us conquered and taken out of that land, right? And that's what's written about here. 2nd Ezra 13 and 40. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hoshea, the king, whom Salamansar, the king of Assyria, led away captive. And he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. Right? And that right there is talking about when we got taken out of the northern kingdom, when the Assyrians came against us. This happened in 722 BC. And you can read about it in 2 Kings 17 and 23, right? Where northern Israel was carried away. And when we were carried away, you could read about the book of Tobit, right? There's a story of the northern kingdom Israelites there in Iran. Also, you have eventually you have the fall of Nineveh, basically the Assyrians, right? They got conquered by the Babylonians roughly about close to 100 years after us northern kingdoms went into captivity and got taken there into the land. Now, when Nineveh fell, us northern kingdom Israelites, we were pretty much free to go about our business. Now, we couldn't go back into the land of the northern Israel, because that land was now full of foreigners, namely known as Kuthites, or basically Persians. Now, some of us did go back, but we went back amongst the southern kingdom, which is recorded in the New Testament, right? But a lot of us, besides spreading out around the known world over there on the eastern hemisphere, a lot of us decided to come to the Americas, okay, and to basically, go into a new land where we wouldn't be bothered by the wickedness of the old world, and also to keep our laws there. And let's continue. It says, But they took this counsel amongst themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow places of the river. For the Most High then showed signs for them, and held still the flood, till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely 1.5 years, and the same region is called Azareth. And when you get into the word Azareth in Hebrew, it basically means another land. Okay, and right here where it says it took a year and a half to get here, we know through the accounts in, I think it's First Kings, under King Solomon, his navy, which were, ship managed by the Hamites, they would take 3 years to come to the Americas, called Ophir, and then go back with all the things that they had gotten from the Americas. So we had that, secret knowledge of this new unknown land, which our King Solomon, sent his navy to retrieve things from. So we had decided to go over there and to basically start over again. Now, while we were there in that land, there are many books that give records of what took place while we were over here, right? Some of our own records and codices that survived, other third-party testimonies which could be found in the Book of Mormon and whatnot. And again, just to clarify, the Book of Mormon is not a biblical prophecy book, but it is a book of historic events, or should I say supposed historic events, of what happened to the Northern Kingdom when they were down here. All the additions that they added to the Book of Mormons about, people, being included in the salvation of the Israelites and all this stuff that contradict the Bible, that's all going off. But the historic accounts in the Book of Mormon, which come from the Indians, right? It's a testimony of the Indians that spoke to Joseph Smith and gave him information of who we were and what had happened to us. That is what's stored there in the Book of Mormon. Now, other things that survived were the testimonies and records of what the settlers and explorers found when they would interview us. And one of these records was found here in the book called Origins of the American Indians, European Concepts, 1492 to 1729, by Lee Eldridge Huddleston. It says, the Mexicans are originally of the 10 tribes captured by Salamansar, and of the family of Issachar, whom the Indians recognize as their special ancestors. You see that? So this is known because we were letting them know who we were. When you get into one special distinction is you have that name Oaxaca, right? And the way Oaxaca is spelled, when you pronounce it in the Quiche language, it's Yashashaka, right? Like that's how it's really pronounced, right? And it's basically it's a adulterated pronunciation of Yashashakar, okay? So the point being is that we're those people, right? We are that tribe. And in this book here, Mysteries of the Mexican Pyramids by Peter Tompkins, this book here, I have it here, right? And I took a picture, and let's just read what it says. It says, in a manuscript written in Quiche again is basically Quiche Nahuatl, or Nahuatl. These were basically broken forms or altered forms of Hebrew, right? But just heavily modified, because you got to remember, the Northern Kingdom, we were over here in the Americas for close to 2,500 years. That's 2,500 years before we were rediscovered again by the Europeans. Okay? So in that time, our language had been altered, changed, had been, adulterated, right? And Quiche and Nahuatl, that was, those were the languages that we were speaking, right? It says, written in Quiche in 1554 by several Maya Indians, its Spanish translator, Padre Dionisio Jose Chanoy, had this to say: it is supposed in the manuscripts that the 3 great Quiche nations mentioned in particular are descendants of the 10 tribes of the kingdom of Israel, whom Salamansar reduced to a perpetual captivity, and who, finding themselves in the confines of Assyria, decided to immigrate. The actual text ran, these then were the 3 nations of Kiches, and they came from where the sun rises, descendants of Israel, of the same language and the same customs. In attestation of what they had written, the Indians signed the document on September 28th, 1554, saying, "We have written that which by tradition our ancestors told us, who came from the other part of the sea, from Gavan Tolan, bordering on Babylonia." Okay, and where is Babylonia? That's modern day Iraq, which is basically Israel, where the land of Israel was at, right? Bordering Babylonia. Now, when it tells you here, Gavan Tolan, Tolan is like the name of an ancient Issacharite king, Tola, right? So this was like Gavan means like king or like leader or something like that, right? So King Tolan. So we were basically referencing our ancient ancestors, right? But again, these records are now coming out, and they're now being shown on lessons like this, so that way we can come back to our true heritage to remember who we were. This is Jeremiah 3:18. "In those days the house of Judah shall walk with the house of Israel, and they shall come together out of the land of the north, to the land that I have given for an inheritance unto their fathers." And this is a prophecy that we are soon to come across, Akim. So right now, the house of Judah, which are the so-called Negroes, are starting to come together with the house of Israel, the so-called Mexicans. Right now, you're seeing tons of connections between, black power and brown pride, right? You're starting to see our people mixing more and more together. You're seeing couples coming together, and our people are just vibing with each other. And why is that? Well, that's because the Lord is bringing us back together. He's closing up the breaches thereof, right? The breaches that the Lord had caused the division. And that's because our punishment is now over, and it's time for us to, like it says here, to inherit the promise that was given to our fathers, right? To, be the rulers of the world, to get back our ancient homeland of us Aztecs, right? The Mexicans, right? That there was a land known as Aztlan that we would go back to, that this was our ancient homeland, and that we would ultimately be taken back to. When you get into the Aztec calendar, for the most part, these 4 boxes right here foretell like the 4 periods are going to come, right? This was the creation, the destruction that came. This here talks about I believe this is like the wars. I forgot what this one is, but this one here talks about the end times, when the Lord is going to rise up the Aztecs, the chosen people, up into the skies like eagles, and he's going to destroy the world. Okay, so that's what this ultimately talks about, right? And again, the reason why we have brought this up is because we are the Israelites. We had these same details and prophecies because we are the same people. This is why when you get into the Aztec commandments, when you look at them, they basically mimic the 10 commandments. Okay, it says, when Spanish friars first set foot on the American soil, they observed and recorded native religious ceremonies and rituals. They were puzzled when they found that the indigenous concepts and practices were, in many ways, quite similar to Roman Catholic practices. The natives not only practiced confessions and penance, Lent, last rites, and Holy Communion, they had their own version of the 10 Commandments, except theirs were 8, but was very similar. At one peculiar ceremony, Father Diego Duran recorded an oration regarding the 8 Indian commandments from an Aztec priest in the mid-1500s, right? And it wasn't that we were practicing Catholic rituals. We were basically practicing, Israelite rituals, which the Catholic Church had basically co-opted and taken on and made it into a religious ceremony. This is Baruch 2 and 30. For I knew that they would not hear me, because it is a stiff-necked people, but in the land of their captivities they shall remember themselves. And that's where we are now, Akim, right? If you're happy to just stumble upon this video and wanted to find out about what's going on, and this video happened to trigger something in you, remember, that's what the scriptures say is going to happen to us, right? It's happened to many of us, Northern Kingdom Israelites, especially of the tribe of Issachar, that we're finding out that our ancient, folklore, Aslan, and all these things that we were taught growing up, it all coincides with the Bible, because it's all the same story, just being told from different perspectives. So either way, Akim, hopefully this video was edifying. I want to give honor and glory and praises to Yahweh, Ba'Shem Yahshai, Ba'Shem Rakakwadash. Shalom.